welcome to today's, I guess we can call it an Oceanside chat with Jesse. I am joined today by Chris Enbom, newly president of Tokyo Century. Thanks for joining me, Chris.
Yeah, no problem, Jesse. And actually, just for clarity, I'm about to be CEO of Tokyo Century. Yeah.
These are not scripted things, so we'll make
I only say that because there is an existing president, and he'd probably be like, "What?"
I just found out on a stupid YouTube channel. What is going on here? I apologize if you hear any wind. I kind of feel like one of those weather people that, it's like, oh, there's a hurricane coming. Let's drive down to it.
Yeah, we all know it's a fake background. So.
Yep, totally superimposed. I put the mountains in there to make me look skinny, but it doesn't work too well.
And I'm so jealous. I just keep looking down at that water, like.
Well, once again, Chris, thanks for taking the time this afternoon, especially last minute. But if you don't mind, just kind of talk about your career in equipment finance.
Sure. I mean, it's been my whole career, and some people I say I look young. Sometimes I don't know, but I've actually been doing this since the 1980s. So started in Japan actually as an intern, graduate student. I was supposed to go work for a bank in Japan through some connections that I had, and they happened to put me in their equipment finance company. Originally I was going to be working in real estate finance, and I did some of that. But the division I went to actually ended up doing their aircraft leasing. So for the first 10 years of my career, starting with that job in Tokyo, I did structured finance, mostly aircraft, some rail, some other big assets, did ammonia facilities and Dow petrochemical facility, and some stuff like that. So we did leverage leasing for these different assets, like I said, and Japanese leases, U.S. leverage leases. I did French leverage leases. I did Canadian leverage leases. And then near the end of my career in structured finance, did LILOs and all kinds of big, crazy tax structured transactions. So that gave me a really good background in kind of very complicated accounting, some very complicated tax stuff, very complicated transactions. One transaction I worked on, it was a $3 million legal bill between all the attorneys just for one deal. So some of them were very complicated. And I was just traveling all over the world, literally doing these transactions. So spent a lot of time away from home. And ultimately, that's kind of what led me to what I'm doing now, which is, I wanted to stay in equipment finance. I love the industry. But after I had my first child, this was back in the late 90s at this point, I just didn't want to be traveling internationally all the time. I was literally jet lagged all the time and kind of just not feeling good physically, from it. So I quit my job, just kind of decided I wasn't happy, had no idea what I was going to do. So that last job, I was working for CIBC, which is a Canadian bank. And I was working on a number of big transactions some of which I actually finished up a couple years later, and some advisory stuff. So they were nice enough to hire me back as an advisor for a bunch of transactions I was working on. And I quit on good terms. I just told them, we tried to figure out a way for me to work maybe from a different location or maybe travel a little less. But at the end of the day, if you're in structured finance doing international deals, you're going to be on the plane all the time. And there's no way to,
that was going to be my question. It's like, do you have to travel for that line of work? But I guess you just answered it. So
You do, yeah, maybe not anymore. Maybe they're used to the Zoom world too now, but it's really hard to conduct, that kind of business, from a phone. I mean, at the time, there wasn't this kind of technology really available. And it is interesting, maybe things will change. Maybe eventually you won't have to spend as much time traveling. But yeah, so I just quit and set up an office like a block away from my house, which was great. I was by myself. I would walk to the office and do my deals, and then I had a lot of time to try to figure out what I wanted to do. And so started looking at different leasing companies and different models. And I had never run a company before. I had never raised capital before. I'd never been an entrepreneur. I didn't really even know how to start. So, but I knew that I wanted to do something where I was, leading the charge on my own, and I wanted to have a balance sheet, and I was willing to, take time and I wasn't in a hurry to create great wealth or anything like that. I just wanted to have something that was doable and would afford a living for me, and long-term where, I had the potential to create something where I was building a real balance sheet. So I started looking at some of the companies I was looking at were, there were a lot of companies at that time that had like $30 to $50 million balance sheets that bought broker paper and were doing kind of, B, C paper, a little more structured, a little tougher credits, kind of stuff. And that's ultimately what I decided, ended up doing. And you just had Doug Houlihan, on your chat. He was one of the first people that I ended up working with, and I ended up working with actually a lawyer that I had met in Japan and some other people that I had known from the past. And we fairly quickly grew to about 30 million in assets. I raised equity money from myself and from family and friends, raised some subordinated debt, and immediately the first year of operations, we got audited financials. We kind of made sure that we were profitable from the beginning, because I knew that you had to build a good reputation, build good financials to be able to attract bank capital. So my first line of credit was with Tokyo Century. And I had known Tokyo Leasing from Japan, from my days when I was selling investments in aircraft to Japanese leasing companies. So I had kept a relationship with that company. They gave me $1 million line of credit, against assets. So I think it's interesting because now I'm back to Tokyo Century, who now owns our company. It was, before we started this call, you and I were talking about relationships and networking and things like that. And that relationship that started at the very beginning of my career, then kept in touch with people, got a line of credit with the same company. And then 20 years later, when I exited, we sold to that company. So those relationships that I literally, I had started over 30 years ago, still come into play. So yeah, I missed, that's how I started AP. The middle of it, I think you've had like Chris Lerma's talked about our company and things like that, but we grew it to almost 100 employees and managing about 300 million of small ticket assets when we sold. I along the way obviously learned small ticket leasing and small ticket credit and more about operations and the accounting that goes into just running the nuts and bolts of a business, which it's interesting because I'd known the complex accounting rules for structured finance for leasing, but I hadn't really done debits and credits. Like when you start your company, you're little sitting there like building the balance sheet and, having to relearn accounting for me and relearn the tax that I had to relearn was I was doing my own state and sales tax returns, income tax returns, things like that by myself, like learning at that level, which is very different.
Well, and you touched on a few things there. So one thing was leverage leasing. I'm assuming that maybe half the people, well, maybe not half, maybe a lower percentage. What's a leverage lease? Because theoretically,
doesn't even exist anymore.
They don't exist. However, they exist for probably another 25 years. So as much as they don't exist, they're still there, and you're kind of like,
there was the structured finance market that I dealt with and that a number of others started their careers in was really shut down by tax and accounting for both tax and accounting reasons around the year 2000. And there's a whole other talk we could do about why, but so leverage leasing went away. Most of the tax structures went away. The governments all started talking to each other and, decided that what we were doing wasn't really creating value for taxpayers.
It was creating value for yourself because that to me seems like it'd be like a strategic way to you approach a deal. And it's like, how do you get creative? And, over my time in equipment finance, you sit there and it's like, like you're just battling over half a fraction of a basis point. We used to be able to get down and dirty and into these things.
Oh, it was pretty crazy what we were doing in a way. I mean, in hindsight.
I mean, down and dirty in a clean, not shady perspective, but just being creative. I guess is probably the best way of phrasing it.
No, and I kind of tried to do. I did a lot of transactions that were totally, there were big tax opinions around it and legal opinions and accounting opinions and there were rules around all this stuff, and we brought a lot of value to end users, to airlines and rail companies and municipalities and people like that. And then it was legally shut down. So, it was.
Fair enough.
But I mean, a lot of people worried at that point that that leasing was going to go away, in a way. And obviously it continues to survive. At the heart of it is the financing of, an asset and trying to solve somebody's problem, or whether it just be straight, getting credit or balance sheet issues or trying to, have flexibility with the asset or what have you, so we're, in different ways, we have different tools, but we're, I think the industry is still solving people's problems, so that's at the heart of it. That's what we're doing.
No, I agree. And a few other things you mentioned there was the full circle relationship with Tokyo Century. I always, for some reason, say it the opposite way, so I apologize for that. But, it's, I think in this industry in general, the relationships you have, whether if it's 1 year down the road or 20 years down the road, you do the right thing by people and good things always happen. So I did not know that was your first line. So now I know.
And it is part of, that has occurred to me a lot in my career in terms of these people or institutions that are, come into my life and not always out of it, but, that have, helped me along the way or help in ways that I don't expect, like when I first met Tokyo Century, I was trying to sell them a product and make money from that, and then the next time I'm trying to get money from them with a loan. And then the next time I'm selling a company to them, and the three totally different things. And there are different people that I've met along the way that have, maybe somebody's there to try to sell me a service, and 10 years later, they're taking an investment in my company, or, like with Doug Houlihan, where, I got him into the business and then we worked together. And then the last big financial crisis, I had to fire him, and he was my good friend, and I don't know, it's just interesting. But we remain friends and talk to each other when we have issues or want, try to figure things out. Yeah, like you said, you don't want to burn bridges, and you just try to do your best by people, even when sometimes it's having to let them go. I mean, it sounds horrible, but there's a lot of different situations that happen. And I think, like everything else in life, a lot of relationships end up, being complicated. But
I mean, at the end of the day, when there's a crisis like that, just like what happened, a year ago, right? Salespeople are one of the first to go. You got to make sure you're battening down the hatches, taking care of your customers.
And he owned equity in the company. It's like, we don't want this company. If the company goes down, we all go down. So, and people who are, obviously he had enough intellectual firepower to understand that concept and at the time. And so, it's still really hard, some of these things. Yeah.
Well, and I think we're going to see more of that coming out of what happened over the last 12 months too. Because a lot of organizations had to trim back, especially on the sales side. And those people aren't necessarily going back. They're going to go and they're going to do something else, because we eventually all want to be our own bosses, right?
Yeah, no, I'm seeing it now. We're seeing a lot of consolidation of especially on the bank side, a lot of these mergers, and I'm seeing a lot of resumes from salespeople, which can be good for us. In fact, we've gotten some people from those situations. Like you said, others will go off and start their own businesses. That's the cycle that it always seems to happen all the time in this industry, that it keeps repeating itself in a way. But every time things change a little bit, or people get worried, it's like, well, the margins are so thin, and there's no money to be made in this business, or what have you. And then people always figure out some new way to make money in the business. So it's
right. Yeah. So I'm going to pivot, if you don't mind. So obviously I met you probably at a UAEL event or EAEL event when those associations existed, but wanted to talk about how you're dedicated your time to the industry trade associations and what that meant to you and kind of what those have given back to you, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think when I started my own finance company, and it was small, there was a time where I kind of thought, why do I need to be part of these organizations, and what does it get me? And at the time we were buying broker transactions mostly. So we needed to be part of those organizations where we could find where we could find brokers specifically. So there was one purpose, that's what I always was thinking about. But I think after 4 or 5 years, kind of running my own business, I really did kind of rethink the whole thing. And it was from talking to people like Randy Haug, who's been, you used to work with, who's obviously kind of a marketing machine, and he's got an agenda for being part of these things. But, there's more than that. I think, he's like, look, this is, the more you put into these organizations, the more you're going to not just get out of it, but you're going to get out of it in ways that you just are never going to expect, and I think that started to happen. I mean, we got much more involved in the UAL, which became NEFA. I then started getting more involved in ELFA as well, even though we were a small company. And, I think there's a couple reasons why I got involved. It was, to obviously make those connections and maybe get the unexpected benefits. But the other was, I guess it was like, if you're really going to be in the industry, it's like, be in the industry, learn it and be a player. It makes your life fuller to really, be able to dig into issues, get to really understand what other people do, understand all the inner workings of, even how the organizations work and what's going on. So, I really did kind of go for it. And, I've did end up getting on the board of the ELFA, did that for 3 years, was on the executive committee, was president of the NEFA at one point. Now I'm on the Lease Foundation Research Committee and board. Got very involved with the CLFP, was treasurer of that organization. So yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of service to a lot of different organizations, and there's some people who are probably really tired of hearing me talk. I apologize. But I truly, I just really enjoy it. I really love the people. I love our industry. I truly want to advance it, and bring more people into it, and have people be excited by it as I am every day. And I have a lot of passion in general, and part of that I want to bring to the equipment finance business. It sounds nerdy, but it's going to make your life fuller, if you make that decision to just fully engage, because it's not like just a job anymore. It just brings in another element. I think that's it's not all about just yourself. It's about trying to serve others and serve serve the industry, and along the way you get those unexpected benefits.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the things that I try to be on as many committees as I possibly can too, because that's what I found out. It's like the harder you work for them, the more you're going to get back, and you don't know necessarily how you're going to get it back, but eventually it just, everything comes full circle. I guess, what advice would you have to someone new getting in the industry? And I look at like your employees that work for you over the years, Doug aside, that have kind of gone through the ranks with you, and you've built quite the culture there. So I guess, what advice would you have for new people getting into equipment finance?
I think it's, if you really are interested in this as a career, is to try to learn as much as you can and try to get as involved as you can in it. Things like the CLFP, take the time, study. You'll get to know other people, just even through going through studying for that exam and doing everything that takes. There's different ways to get involved. Trying to promote yourself within your organization as a leader, which then may allow you to get onto things like the ETEC, which is the committee for kind of the young up and coming people in the equipment with the ELFA. And you have to keep learning. I'm still learning, and it's not always about equipment finance, but like at one point, actually Houlihan was the one Doug Houlihan started teaching me about database. Like, we had to learn SQL, and it was like SQL for dummies. It literally was it was like reading the book, and learn the accounting, learn tax, learn everything there is to know about our business. And when you start getting into it, I mean, it's fascinating, because it's actually really complicated. And but it's that combined with kind of getting into what we do. I mean, at the end of the day, we're financing these cool equipment for all these businesses and making their life better, and that part of it too. Like, I've gotten, now we own a dealership, which is selling the equipment. And I love that side of it too, because it's,
I enjoy the pictures that you post on social media when someone's driving away, like their first vehicle. That's exciting.
It's awesome. And they're so excited, driving away in that big truck or that big shiny piece of equipment. And that their lives are being made better, their work lives are being made better a lot of times because they got something that works better. Or, so yeah, I mean, it's, you can, I don't know. I guess I would say try to nerd out on your job and really embrace it. If you don't like it, maybe it's not for you, but if you really, really want to go far, you got to work on yourself every day, work on yourself as a leader, try to promote yourself as a leader, try to ask your bosses or others in the organization, how can you do more learn more, show that enthusiasm to learn and to roll up your sleeves, and you'll do well.
Yeah, and the one thing I might add to that is, if people are struggling and they're trying to figure out if equipment finance is for them, look at the NEFA board, look at the ELFA board, reach out to some of those people and ask for their advice. I mean, I don't think there's one person on either of those boards that wouldn't spend 30 minutes trying to help somebody out.
Yeah, we have a guy who he ended up, he was a younger guy. I mean, compared to me, but let's say somebody, in their late 20s, really, really great guy. Ended up serving on one of the committees that I was on with an NEFA type organization, and was like, look, I don't really know much about, what we're doing here, but I'll do whatever, And sure enough, reached out to me again a few months ago, like, hey, I'm kind of looking at making a move. And short story made long, we now, we're 2 months into having hired him. He's awesome. He's got great enthusiasm. He's helping us out a ton. And, if nothing else, those organizations and just making those connections. And like you said, no, I'm never going to be offended if somebody reaches out to me. I might just delete the email because that's your biggest risk, right? But I'm not going to be offended, and I'm probably going to remember your name, and that's the worst case. And the best case, I'll be like, yeah, I'd love to talk to you. A lot of people are really busy, but I don't think any good executive is going to be offended if somebody tries to reach out to them to learn more or be more connected or what have you.
And to your point, there's a lot of those subcommittees. I remember Darren Leasey, when got him to join, I think it was NEFA had just started, he joined the membership committee. And I think he was president last year. So I was like, hey,
exactly.
Look how you've grown through the ranks, man.
Yeah, and he was one of those young guys, who was kind of, but now, still pretty young, but definitely, making his way through the ranks and doing really well and fully involved, like you said, and definitely out there at the conferences and even at the bar for a bit after the conferences and just getting to know people. And it's all part of what makes this equipment finance world fun.
Yeah, that's a good advice too. Make sure whatever you're doing, if there is something that's going on at those trade shows or conferences, go to those events. Don't sneak away and do something else on a personal side. Those relationships. I think there's a concert we went to in Georgia, Atlanta the one time. I mean, I just think of all these like one-off events that we've done where you're just kind of like, but those are memories that last a lifetime, not to be corny. But
no, that's true. It's funny. I was just talking to somebody about that the other day. I think 80 of us went to a concert on a beautiful September night. It was the Eagles, and they happened to be staying in the hotel that we were at as well.
Interesting.
But yeah, I mean, those types of things, you never forget, and make it fun, and the people make it fun. I mean, great people in our business.
So I'll just kind of wrap this up, Chris. I've always been asking people a little fun fact about yourself, if you don't mind sharing with people.
Oh man, fun fact about me.
Besides that you can ski
I tend
snowboard.
Yeah, I mean, I do tend to kind of probably have these, several year obsessions about different things. So, I took up surfing for a while, and I got very involved in surfing. And then I went to music and learned to play guitar. And then I ended up with the bass guitar and playing in bands. Then I decided I wanted to learn how to fly planes. So then I bought a plane and I'm flying around planes. And so what's next? But yeah, no, I mean,
I was just trying to think. Yeah, I knew all those things. And then I saw you like surfing down a snow trail, and I'm like, that's interesting. I look at you and I'm like, see how smooth he is? You'd see me like have to do 10 takes, and then I'd constantly fall. So.
That was the first time I'd ever tried that. So I'm glad I looked fairly smooth. But no, I've always been very involved in kind of things, motion sports. So, I mean, I was a big ski racer growing up. That was my sport, and always water skiing, wakeboarding, still wakeboard and a lot in the summer. Always have a boat. We're on the water here. So yeah, love doing that kind of stuff, doing it with my kids and stuff too.
I'm assuming you've been skydiving?
No. I see those things, people doing that, and I'm like,
I got one thing on you then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind flying a plane, but like jumping out of it, it's like, no, the doors are there for a reason.
Yeah, that's perfectly fair. And I think they say that to everyone the first time. It's like, you realize you're jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. I'm like, I'm already up here. I don't want to think about it. I just want to go. So, all right, Chris. Well, thanks again. I appreciate you, coming on to tell your story. Look forward to hopefully seeing you here in a couple months. And, once again, just thanks for your time, man.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks for having me on, and always appreciate the friendship.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris.
All right.